Games based on popular movies are always tricky to pull off in my opinion. You're essentially trying to take an iconic character from one medium and put into another. You want to introduce new ideas, but at the same time, stay true to the original story. On top of that, the game has to be fun and entertaining. It's a difficult balancing act, which I feel a lot of movie-based games struggle to pull off. I've been a huge fan ever since I saw the first RoboCop movie, so naturally, I was super excited when I heard there was going to be a RoboCop game. And after seeing the first initial trailer, I couldn't wait to see the actual gameplay. A few months go by and they finally show a glimpse of how the game was going to play. My first reaction was slightly underwhelming to say the least. Not only did it look like your typical generic first-person shooter, but the visuals somehow looked like they were scaled back from the first trailer. All the excitement I had built up previously had evaporated, replaced with a horrible sinking feeling in my stomach. You know the feeling. It's the one you get when you know the finished game is probably gonna end up sucking. Well, RoboCop Rogue City is finally out, and I spent the last few weeks playing it on PlayStation 5. Were my gut instincts correct? Let's find out. Now, I hate to start off a review with a complaint, but it's such a sticking point for me I just have to address. It has to do with the cutscenes, and I'm sure you've noticed it too if you played it on consoles. Whenever there's a camera cut, the very first frame is always pixelated for some reason. Look closely and you'll notice the image has this weird blocky look. At first I thought it was my imagination, but when I played it back in slow motion, I noticed the issue. It's highly distracting and really puts a hamper on the graphics overall. I'm not sure if this pertains only to the PS5 version, but I'm hoping there's a patch that will fix it. It's not game-breaking, but it does give everything a very unpolished look. It also doesn't help that some textures take a while to load in, especially when using quality mode. And while we're on the subject, the game offers two graphical settings, performance and quality. Performance gives you dynamic 1080p 60 FPS, while quality gives you dynamic 1440p 30 FPS. Look, I'm gonna be real with you guys. The game looked like shit when I first played it. It looked like a PS3 game to be honest, which was confusing because all the screenshots I see online make it look phenomenal. Unfortunately, it's one of those games you have to keep playing to really appreciate its little nuances. More so on consoles even, since there's such a steep resolution drop. Graphical detail between the two modes looked pretty similar, with performance looking a little bit soft in some areas. And although I would prefer a sharper image using quality mode, I feel this game needs to be played at a higher frame rate. The majority of my playthrough ran smoothly, but I did notice the heavier scenes tended to drop a bit. There's two instances where I noticed it the most. Your mileage may vary on this one, depending on how sensitive you are to frame drops. It really wasn't bad at all for me, and in my opinion, this isn't exactly the game that requires pinpoint accuracy. Just aim and shoot. It's not the best looking game on consoles, but what it does well is portray the movie's dark tone and gritty atmosphere. And for that, I have to give the game props. The developers did an excellent job at recreating some of the movie sets. The police station looks almost like an exact replica from the first film, with people moving around and going about their day. And the infamous crime scene is eerily familiar. So much so that it sent chills down my spine. Honestly, after a while, the game went from looking okay to great, especially the environments. They're varied, well detailed with reflective surfaces and moody lighting. I think the terms they were using online were lumen and nanite. I have no idea what they mean, and quite frankly, I'm not gonna pretend to either. All I know is some parts of the game looked okay, but there are some parts that look absolutely brilliant. The destructible environments are also a nice touch too. I just love seeing a room get torn apart by gunfire. It's almost poetic in a way. You'll sometimes hit a gas tank or a flammable object, resulting in a huge explosion of color and debris. Blood splatter effects look cool too, although they can be a bit chunky sometimes. I could have sworn it looked like a fountain of pixelated blood. Also, shooting a guy in the crotch never gets old. Facial animation, I have to say, are just slightly above average. They're not terrible, but just not something you expect from next gen. Or current gen, whichever you want to call it. And watching closely, I think the lip syncing might be off a bit. RoboCop himself looks great, however. Having Peter Weller return to provide voice work really helps with the continuity. My only complaint here is that his walking animation looked a little strange at first. I guess it's been a while since I've last seen him walk, so it took some time getting used to. But by the end, I think it looked pretty good. Other than that, he looks just like he does in the movies. The shine on his metallic armor is superb, and kudos to the visual detail when looking through the visor. The cracked glass from sustained damage and the crosshair that lines up when aiming down the sights adds so much to the overall presentation. I especially love the scan lines that run up and down the screen as well. It really does help to differentiate from looking like another typical first-person shooter. Plus, I think it helps hide the resolution drop. Aside from a few graphical hitches, this is a very good-looking game overall. It just takes a while to get there, especially on consoles. Oh, and the loading is super fast.
The biggest misconception I had with RoboCop Rogue City is that it's solely a first-person shooter, when in fact it's actually closer to action RPG. I mean, there's plenty of shooting, don't get me wrong, but it's not what the entire game's made of. Half your time is spent tracking down people for interrogation, and the other half is spent wasting drug dealers. Interrogations usually revolves around a missing person or a murder suspect. Once at the crime scene, you use your detective skills to scan the area for any clues of foul play. It's sort of like the night vision mode in the Batman Arkham games. Civilians can be questioned, and depending on how you respond, can alter how the story unfolds. These parts are usually slow and more drawn out, but surprisingly fit perfectly into the RoboCop story. When you're tracking down people, you'll most likely be in the downtown area. This is the main open world hub you'll be exploring, and one you'll be revisiting many times throughout the game. And when I say open world, I don't mean it in the traditional sense. This is no Grand Theft Auto. The open world in Rogue City is very restricted. You won't be able to go anywhere you want. There's no bowling alleys for you to go to, or street races for you to engage in. It's a very linear approach to open world. It's a lot more condensed, yet big enough that you're able to explore. You don't need a vehicle to get around either, since anywhere you need to go is within walking distance. Personally, I love it. It's a streamlined approach to the whole open world formula, and one I think cuts back on a lot of the BS I just don't have time for. When you're not interrogating people, you'll be shooting drug dealers and retrieving stolen goods. The shooting, I have to say, is very well done, highly addictive, and wildly entertaining. You feel like an unstoppable force plowing through rooms, but you never get to the point of being completely invincible. Perfectly balanced is what they say. My only complaint is that I wish you could fire two guns at once. John Woo style, baby. And before I forget, please remember to use the punch. It's such an underrated move that's gotten me out of quite a few jams. There's also a variety of weapons you can pick up, each one different from the other. But your main weapon is the classic Auto 9. You know, the one from the movie. And although it does not require you to pick up ammo, you do have to reload after every clip. Fortunately, with the right upgrade, you can set it to automatic, and pretty much never have to reload ever again. That's freaking awesome. The only drawback is the Auto 9 upgrade system, which can be a little time consuming. It's sort of like a game within a game. You have to create a path by connecting OCP chips you've collected throughout the game. I'll be honest, this took me a while to completely understand. I'm not even going to attempt to explain it, because I'm probably just going to jack it up and piss someone off in the comments. RoboCop himself can also be upgraded. It's a pretty simple upgrade system, which you've seen countless times in other games before. More armor, faster reload, dashing, and a pulse wave that stuns nearby enemies. You know the deal. Lastly, I just want to mention the miscellaneous objectives. These are just small things you can do as you're walking around town. They're actually kind of funny, to be honest. You essentially walk around handing out tickets. For example, cars you find parked in front of a fire hydrant get issued a ticket. Public vandalism, and even fending off street gangs in front of a convenience store. It really does make you feel like RoboCop. In my humble opinion, this is the real sequel to RoboCop 2 that we never got. Crime is still rampant in old Detroit, and there's a constant struggle to see who can take control. You play as Alex Murphy, trying your best to clean the streets of drug gangs and political corruption. The thing that impressed me the most about this game is just how well the story is told through character interactions. There's a human quality to it I can't quite explain. It's more than just simple dialogue options. Each person you speak to appear to have some sort of personal struggle they're going through. It makes everything you do in the game have more weight to it, I suppose you could say. For example, walking around the police station to get signatures for a get well card. It might not sound like the most exciting thing to do in a video game, but it's a reflection of what we do in real life, and the game somehow captures that emotion. However, I think the part that affected me the most are the haunting flashbacks. Call me a wimp, but these moments would send chills down my spine, forcing you to rethink what is real and what's an illusion. They are so well executed, you think they were from some other survival horror game. Totally took me by surprise. Despite some of its graphical flaws, RoboCop Rogue City is indeed a very fun game to play. Fast and exciting shootouts with a deep and intriguing story make this an unforgettable experience. It might not have all the trimmings of a big budget AAA blockbuster, but it does come close to matching the film's original tone and atmosphere. A clear indication of how much respect the developers have for the source material. If you're a fan of the 1987 original and its sequel, RoboCop Rogue City is an absolute must-buy. A hidden gem all the way. Highly recommended.